We're on bottom of Mem Chesed and Aleph. Okay. Okay. So we're in the middle of the debate between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. As you might recall, Rabbi Yochanan says Kinyan Paris, Kinyan Agufdami, owning the produce. You're considered the primary owner. It's as if you own the property itself. And Rish Lakish disagrees. Now, the Gemara pointed out an obvious difficulty with Rish Lakish, which is that if you are of the opinion that sons of a father are like buyers as opposed to inheritors, meaning you hold ein brera. If you hold ein brera, it's always going to be, you never know how to divide a father's assets. Yes.
Quick
bottom of the page.
For the terminally short memory, ein brera again means no.
Brera is can something be retroactively verified?
Okay.
So in other words, if a father inherits to his kids all these assets, can Brera come along and say, because according to the court, this is what you each got, actually, so this is actually what your father inherited you? Mm-hmm. Or do we say, no, we don't know what your father gave you, because it's all mixed together. It's really impossible to divide. Mm-hmm. But what we could do is we could sort of make an agreement, a buying agreement. So you all could buy into this agreement. Now, if you say you have to buy into the agreement, then every 50 years, effectively, the whole land of Israel is redivided. Mm-hmm. And the only one who would ever be able to bring Bikurim would be a single child, a single son, the son of a single son, the son of a single son, back to Yeshua ben Nun. Because everybody else is considered a buyer, only has Kinyan Paris. That was where we ended yesterday. However, Im calls that, despite all this, comes along. Rava, and Rava says we have two proofs to the opinion of Rish Lakish. A verse and a Mishnah. Last line of the page.
Last line on 48a.
On 48a. Rava Kro Masnisa Messiah Rish Lakish. A verse and a pasuk both support the opinion of Rish Lakish. Kro, the pasuk, b'mispar shnei tvuos imachalach. The pasuk here is talking about somebody who sells property on Shemitah. I'm sorry, somebody who sells property during the Yovel cycle. So the Torah says, what are you selling him? You're selling him actually years of produce, sort of a long-term lease agreement. It's, the 99-year lease. I was just talking to somebody who was trying to sell, he was trying to buy something, but the title paper doesn't allow him to do it. So he's leasing it for 530 years. Anyway, so effectively the 99-year lease, the same concept. I think in America, the maximum amount you can lease without owning is 99 years. So people want to get around certain things. They want to buy it, but not actually buy it. You do the 99-year lease.
Should have had a longer lease on Hong Kong.
Yeah, exactly. Or the Panama Canal, or even scarier, actually, is that there are large neighborhoods in Jerusalem that were 99-year leased in 1930s. And as part of the lease agreement, they were leased from the Greek Orthodox Church. Oh. As part of the lease agreement, the property has to be destroyed and given back unmolested to the Greek Orthodox Church. And that's going to be coming due in a few years. And there are major neighbors in Jerusalem. These are I don't know what the resolution is going to be, but that's a serious issue. Anyway, so the Torah says if you buy a property in Yovel, you're buying years of tvua. What does it sound like? Kinyan Paris Lav, Kinyan Aguf. It sounds like if you're buying years of fruit, it sounds like it's not Kinyan Aguf. Masnisa Abrayasa, the Tanya we learned. Okay. This touches on one of the most difficult sugyas in Shas in terms of lacking practical clarity. I'll try to explain it, even though I can't say that. I've learned the sugya twice, but I can't say I understand it. We've touched on this in the past. The concept is sort of as follows. A bechor gets a double portion in the inheritance. However, there's this distinction called roi and muhsik. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole trying to identify what is roi and what is muhsik. It's very, very complicated. But roughly speaking, roi is something that comes after. Muhsik is that which he already owns. Okay, so what happens if he owns a bunch of cows and one of the cows gives birth? That's not called roi. That's called muhsek. It's more like if somebody makes payment or something was missing, payment that was owed or something like that, and payment was paid after the father died. Although that's also complicated. Okay, it's hard to identify exactly what would be a good distinction here. Regardless, the field that goes back in Yovel is called muhsek, not roi. What does that tell you? The guy who bought the field from his father, who's going to give it back in Yovel after his father died, is not the muhsek of the field. He's the leaser of the field. The muhsek of the field is the father. That tells you Kinyan Paris Lafi Kinyan Aguftam. Because we consider the field owned by the father muhsek completely, and therefore the Bechara takes a double portion. Amar Abaya. Abaya says, Naktinan, Bal b'nechse ishtoi tzarech harshah. We learned that if a husband wants to invoke a legal argument on behalf of his wife, he requires a harshah. Harshah is the equivalent of a power of attorney. And the reason for this is because otherwise he could say, I'm not interested in going to court with you. I don't know you. If it makes a harshah, if the wife makes a harshah, power of attorney, so then she can appoint her husband as the one to represent her in this field. And this is only true El Deloy Nochas Aperi. This is only true where the claim is just about the land itself, but not about the produce. However, if the claim is about the produce too, Al Nochas Aperi, Migudim Shtoydina Aperi Mishtoydina Agufa. Once the husband has a right to litigate with regard to the produce, which belongs to him, because Nichse Malug, the regular assets that have no condition or prenup, the produce goes to the husband. So once the husband can litigate about the produce, he can litigate about the core property itself on behalf of his wife. And that ends Parak HaShilach, which is one of the more difficult prakim in Masechta Gittin. However, it does not get that much easier today. Sorry, you'll have to wait all that. Okay, let's do a little bit of review in the sort of the laws of the land, quite literally. So there's three types of property. Remember this because translate it a few times, but then after that we'll have to go along without translating it. There's three levels of property. There's called idis, baininus, and ziburis. What's the difference? Idis is something that's very easy to sell. Typically, in terms of agricultural land, agricultural farmland, it's very fertile. It's fertile agricultural farmland. Baininus is sort of average. Ziburis is junk. So ziburis land can be very, very large, but it's not very fertile. And when it's on the market, it takes a very long time to sell. It's the least liquid of the properties. Whereas idis is the most fertile and the most liquid. Okay. Next idea is mishabdi versus b'nei chari. Mishabdi is property that's indebted. For example, let's say I have a field, okay, and I sold the field to you. But I also owed money before I sold the field to you. My creditor can collect your field. That field would be called mishabdi. If I still had a regular field, that field would be called b'nei chari. That would be called a free field. Mishabdi would be a field with a lien on it that was sold. B'nei charin would be a field that was not yet sold. A field under my ownership. Okay. Another general rule here is as follows. When we sort of, the idea here, my creditor, or if I damage somebody, the guy who I damaged can collect your field, Jules' field, if I sold it to Jules. And the sort of the logic here is he should have known better. He should have known there was an outstanding debt. The guy who you when you bought the field, you should have known that there was a creditor that could have come, or I owed money to somebody who I damaged, and they could have came and collected the field. Because of that, my creditors can collect your fields. However, this is only true under certain circumstances. Let's say nobody knew about the loan. For example, what type of loan do people not know about? Milva al peh, a loan without a document. So in that case, if the loan does not have a document, in that scenario, he cannot collect your property. He can only collect b'nei charin. There's another example, which is something that's not fixed. Okay, so how much is my debt? Whatever it is, right? It's a fixed amount. It's this amount of money. How much is the damages? The court evaluated the damages, $100,000. What happens if I have commitment to support my kids? How much is that? There's no limit to it, right? It's sort of a variable. The court will sell off my assets for a year to support my kids, and then they'll go after the next set of assets for the next year, and the next set for the next year, et cetera, et cetera. The same thing is true if a husband makes a commitment to support his wife. Same story. These things are all not fixed. One more example is called shvach kakois. Okay, so what happened was there was a thief, call him Reuven. Reuven, the thief, stole a property. He sold it to me. So I didn't realize he was a thief. So I put a lot of investment into the property. And now it was $100,000 property. Now it's worth $1 million. I put all these investments in. Now, let's say I put in $500,000 of investments, and the value of the property increased. Maybe because it was agricultural property, and now it's irrigated, and it's been graded, and now it's very fertile, and it's producing, it has these great plants, and it's giving off a tremendous amount of crop every year. Or maybe it was development, and I built a development on top of it, and there's a lot of rent. Now the original owner who it was stolen from comes back 10 years later and says it's mine, and here's the evidence. This guy was a thief. You were tricked by a thief. Sold the Brooklyn Bridge, and I'd like to back now. So what's the halacha? The halacha is like this: because it's sort of a tikkun olam, any expense that I put in the field. So let's say I bought the field for $100,000. I put in $500,000 in the field. It's worth $1 million. $600,000 I can recoup from the original owner. 100 plus expenses. The remaining 400 I can collect from the thief. Now, again, this number is always going to be a variable number. It could very likely change. People aren't keeping track of it. And therefore, if the thief has Meshabdi, I cannot collect from Meshabdi. Let's say the thief had other properties that he actually owns. He didn't just steal them. I can collect from them as long as they're in the thief's domain. But if it leaves the thief's domain, he sells it to somebody else, I can no longer collect it because it's a variable number. Let's begin the Mishnah. Hanazokin shaman lebeidis. Nizokin is damages. Whether these are in general damages are two categories of damage. We call them niskei mammon and really chayvel. Niskei mammon is damages of your property, your dog, your ox, etc. Your ox went ahead and on a rampage. Your dog bit somebody, etc. Or there's chayvel, which is with niskei adam, which would be chayvel or eish. Chayvel would be battery, where you assaulted somebody else. Or eish would be, for example, if you shot a bullet into somebody else's property, or you lit a fire on your property, it spread into the other guy's property. Bor would be another example of that. You dug a pit, somebody fell in. That's that's sort of bor. I believe is actually niskei mammon. It's not niskei gufay. Niskei adam. Okay. Now, eish actually is machlekes. Eish is machlekes whether it's in the category of niskei mammon or niskei gufay. How do you treat eish? Okay, regardless, nizokin, any type of nizokin, any type of damage is paid out beidis, the most fertile field. Ubalchayiv, a creditor, bebainis, mid-range. Ksubas isha, the ksub of a woman is bezibur is the lowest. Rabbi says, af ksubas isha bebainis, the ksub of a woman is also baininus. One does not collect from indebted property. Regular property is available. In other words, you have no right to collect. This is called the argument of hinachti l'cham makom ligvei. So if the creditor comes to take the field, and he comes to take the field that is now sold to somebody else, it's meshubed. The buyer, let's say in this case, let's say my creditor would take Jules' field. Jules would say, "Look, I left you property to collect. Go collect it by me," and that would be the law. Even if it's a lower quality, even if what you have is mid-range property and what I have is low range, also that'd be enough. If you collect from inheritors, orphans, you collect ziburis, lowest range. Anything that's a variable payment. Okay, anything that's variable payment is not collected from a shubadim. So, for example, achilas peres shvach kakais. This is going to be the type of scenario where somebody made an investment in the field, and now the field is worth more, or maybe it has a crop on it, right? So the thief stole the field. I planted it, so I invested all the blueberry trees, and now I have blueberries also besides the blueberry trees. So the crop of blueberries, the blueberry trees is the expense. The crop is not an expense, right? I didn't expend the crop. I expended the investment to get the crop. That I can recoup from the original owner. But the pears, the fruits, or the increase in value of the field, that I can recoup from the thief, but I can't collect it from bnei chayr, from mishubadim, indebted property. Ulamaz and ishav abadis, or a commitment to support a woman or children. These are all variable payments, and therefore they're not collected from the chasam mishubadim because of tikkun olam, because there's no way for the buyer to do to have due diligence. It's impossible to do due diligence because it's always changing. And another law is that if somebody finds a lost object, he does not make an oath because of tikkun olam. What would the oath be? Very simple. You can imagine why this is the case. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to make an oath. Otherwise, life would be unlivable. Nobody would return a lost object. You return my lost wallet, and I'll open the wallet and I say, when it's $10,000 in here, where they all go? You steal it? So I might say tikkun olam because nobody would return lost objects if you had to actually make a shvuah.
And the shvuah would be that you found the object.
That there was I didn't take your $10,000.
Oh, we got the more now, Rabbi?
It would potentially be a shvuah of vitamin mixes, by the way. So that would be a shvuah of rice. We got the Gemara. Yes, at the Gemara. So the Gemara says Nizakin pays idis when they tikkun olam. So Gemara says tikkun olam. The reason why Nizakin pays idis, Nizakin is damages. You pay most fertile property. The siv meitav sadeu meitav karamei shalom. Torah says you pay meitav. Meitav means the best field. Rabbi says Rabbi Shmuel. This is necessary according to the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. I'll explain Rabbi Shmuel first, and then the Gemara will explain Rabbi Shmuel, but pretend not to understand Rabbi Shmuel first. Okay, so what does Rabbi Shmuel say? The question is, how do we define the best property? Is this sort of an objective standard? We call them the real estate agents, and we ask them what's the best property. The agricultural experts? No. According to Rabbi Shmuel, the way it's defined is the determination of the most fertile is actually in the one who was damaged. So I damaged Reuven. We look at Reuven's property, the best of Reuven's property, that's what I'm obligated to pay. Let's say I have property that's equal to Reuven's best property, and I also have property that's better than that. So in that case, I would have to pay the lower level property. I would be exempt from paying the higher level property. However, because of tikkun olam, the rabbi says, no, we want to disincentivize this type of behavior and therefore make you pay your best property, even though the one who was damaged doesn't have an equivalent level property. Because of tikkun olam, to disincentivize damaging, we require you to pay the best of your property. Okay. My Rabbi Shmuel, what's the Rabbi Shmuel? So now pretend that you don't know what Rabbi Shmuel says. Okay, the Tanya we learns. The best of his field, the best of his vineyard, he'll pay. Okay, Meitiv Sadeh Shal Nizik, Meitiv Karma Shal Nizik. The best of the field of the Nizik, the best of the vineyard of the Nizik. What the Gemara at this point thinks, the best of the field means what? It means you go into the vineyard, you find the best row in the vineyard, which is the top row, which is like the most productive, and that's what you pay. Even though so there was a bunch of rows, it's 100 rows, and your animal went ahead and consumed one whole row. So you find the best row, and that's the value that you pay. That's the Gemara understanding at this point. We'll go back to the way I explained in a moment. Rabbi Kiva disagrees. He says, it's not that we choose to evaluate based on the most valuable row of the field. It's that when you make the payment, you pay for the most fertile property. The Kal V'chomer L'Hektish, and certainly this is true about Hektish. We'll explain the Kal V'chomer L'Hektish a little bit later. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. Let's say a guy has in his field the best row. The best row is worth $1,000, and the worst row is worth $100. So if the animal eats the best row, how much does he pay? According to Rabbi Shmuel, $1,000. Let's say he eats the worst row, how much does the animal pay? Also $1,000. It's not fair. It's a knas. It's a penalty. Well, why don't you pay what you damage? It ate one of the rows. We know it ate a certain amount, but we don't know which one. Let's say the field was in the middle of being harvested. We see the cow, drenched in grape juice. So we clearly know he's been having a good time, but we don't know where in the field he drenched himself because all the pickers are out in the field too. There's no way to know. So we don't know what he did. Ikhusha ishmena, if it was in the best row or the worst row. The Mishal let me make that we have to give him for the best row. Okay, what's the problem with this? Rava says, hold on a second. If the video cameras were on, the CCTV, if you know that he ate the poor, he was rolling around in the poorest of the vineyard. So then how much would he pay? Mishalim Chusha, he would pay the smallest amount. Hash the Loyadina, now that we don't know Mishalim Shmeina, is that a reason to make him pay more? The typical rule with regard to any law of money is Hamaitzi Mechavere Olav Haraya. Whoever is trying to take money away from his friend needs to be the one to make the proof, to bring the evidence. So therefore, you want to say that he ate from the best property. Well, then you have to prove he ate from the ox ate from the best property. El Omer Vacha Bar Yaakov. So Bar Yaakov says, we're on top of him, test some at all now. We go back to the explanation that I just explained. And what's the scenario that we're talking about? We're talking about a scenario where the best property of the nizik, of the one who is damaged, is the worst property of the damager. So for example, I was the one who damaged Reuven. So I have 3 fields. One is a very good field, one is mid-range, and one is my worst field. But even my worst fields, it's in the Willamette Valley. And the guy who was damaged, he has fields in Lakeview or whatever. He has fields in Lakeview is pretty fertile, actually, in Jones River. You know, Jones Day.
In Southwest Portland, a really bad part of Southwest
Yeah.
Portland.
So can I give my worst field, which is as good as his best fields? So that's the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel savar b'denizik shamin, Rabbi Kiva savar b'demazik shamin. Rabbi Kiva says you have to pay your own best. Okay, why does Rabbi Shmuel say you have to pay his best? My time to Rabbi Shmuel. Never said lamata, but never said lamala. Masa demur lamala and nisik. Afsa demur lamata denisik. It says when you talk about payment, meitav soda. It says you pay the best of the field, and it all when the pasuk is talking about a person's animal eating in somebody else's field, it says ubir b'stei he eats in another person's field. Just like that other person's field is the one who was damaged. In other words, my animal was eating in somebody else's vineyard. So too, my payment is that other person's field. Equivalent, the measuring stick is the one who was damaged field. From Kiva Savar, Kiva says, Meitav Sadehu Yishalom. It says the best of his fields. The one who's making the payment has to give the best of his fields. Rabbi Shmuel, so what does Rabbi Shmuel do? In other words, we need both. What does this mean? Typically, the rule is you pay the other guy's field, the one who was damaged. But the pasuk tells me the Isla, in other words, you have to pay your own best. The Isla mazik idis v'ziburis idei l'shavik idis tenizik imshalom le'mimetiv. Let's say that they're not exactly parallel. So if you had to give a rating to each, yes, about a quarter of the 49A, about a third of the way down. The first one line is Ki'idis Tenizik. Ki'idis. Chaf ayin yud. Okay. So as follows. Let's say we have to give a rating to each field. Okay. So the Nizik has field ratings 1, 3, and 5. That's the one who's damaged. The Mazik, the damager, he has ratings. So he has ratings where 1 is the lowest, 10 is the highest. So he has ratings of, let's say, a 10, a 4, and a 3. Right. So Nizik has 1, 3, and 5. The Mazik has 10, 4, and 3. So over here, if he gives him the 4 field, that's not his idis. It doesn't equal the idis to the Nizik. So then we say, oh, make up today, you have to give him the 10. You have to pay him from the 10. Give him from that field because you don't have idis that equal 5 or greater. Rabbi Kiva says, Pasuk says that you pay, that nizakin is paid out of idis, and certainly hektish is also paid of idis. What exactly does this mean? What's the scenario that we're talking about that pertains to hektish? For sure, payment to hektish has to be made of idis. Well, what exactly happened? Why are you making a payment? So Gemara says, the Gemara tries to identify. Where an animal, your animal, my animal, let's say, hit an animal, it gored an animal that belonged to hektish. Gemara says, and if that's the case, actually what happens is my animal is exempt, I'm exempt from paying. Because the Torah says you pay, the way it works is the first time goring is considered abnormal behavior for an animal. We learned about this extensively in the beginning of Baba Kama. There are three ways an animal could damage something else. Number one is an abnormal event. Number two is for its own enjoyment. You think eating, right? Rolling in the mud, if that, if you have a hippopotamus or something, whatever. And the third one is in its general course of action. So you think of a horse that runs down the it's running down the sidewalk and it knocks over some farmer's market table or something. The horse never intended on knocking off the farmer's table. He wasn't looking to eat. He wasn't hungry. He just happened to knock it down. The rule is as follows. An abnormal event, there's a distinction between tam and muad, right? An abnormal event is a horse that goes to a human being and kicks it specifically, right? A ox that gores another animal. In that event, we presume the animal's innocent the first three times and make a half payment. The halacha is this half payment is a knas. In truth, you should be exempt entirely. Because there's no real way you can protect an animal that isn't known to gore from goring. Okay, and therefore you make a half payment. However, if the damage was to hektish, you make no payment at all. Okay, so obviously that can't be the payment that's made to hektish because you're not making any payments. Okay, so what's the scenario? A guy says, I'm giving a commitment. I'm giving $100 to the temple fund. The Asi Gizbar Vishagel Meidis. The Gizbar goes and he collects the best property. The Gemara says, hold on, why the best? He should be no better than a debtor, than a creditor. And a creditor collects baininess. And if you'll tell me, there are Kivas of the opinion that says that a creditor takes idis kenizakin equal to nezikin. In other words, that's what Rabbi Kiva is coming to tell me, that he actually treats a b'chayv equal to nezikin. They both get idis equal mifrach. There's no kav chaymer. Mal b'chayv can yafa kaycha b'nezakin. Timer b'hektish can hura kaycha b'nezakin. So Rabbi Kiva says that every b'chayv gets idis. He gets the best property, and certainly hektish also gets the best property. There's no certainly there. The reason why a b'chayv takes the best property is because he also collects when it's time for nizakin, when he's damaged. Whereas hektish that does not collect when it's damaged, maybe actually wouldn't collect this best property when it comes to collecting a debt. Because maybe you're trying to source the idea that a debt to hektish gets the best property. And what's the source of that idea? The source of the idea is the fact that everybody else who's a creditor also gets the best property. But there is no comparison between everybody else. Because everybody else, we can identify a link between them and the best property. What's the link? Nezikin. But that link does not exist in the context of kachim. Did I lose you? Again. The Gemara is proposing as follows. Rabbi Kiva says that kal v'chaymer, it's obvious that hektish will collect idus. Okay, so the Gemara says, why is it obvious? Because actually Rabbi Kiva holds every creditor collects idus, best property. Okay, so if every creditor collects best property, for sure hektish should collect best property. The Gemara says, no, it's not obvious. Why is it not obvious? Because maybe the reason why we can identify a link between everybody else collecting best property because we know they get best property as it pertains to Nezikin. And therefore it makes sense to say, we'll equate a debt with Nezikin. Nezikin is damages. However, what does not make sense is that by hektish, we don't know that hektish ever gets to collect idus. Because when hektish is damaged, they don't necessarily collect anything. And therefore, maybe as a creditor, they wouldn't collect idus either. Now, to be very precise here, the actual source of collecting the best property is by niskei mammon, meaning when your ox kills and damages, not when you damage. When you damage, we don't know that you actually pay idus. They're learned out. They're compared to each other. But the original source is damage of your animal. And actually, if your animal damages hektish, you're exempt from paying. So therefore, there's no link between hektish and idis, and therefore there's no kal v'chomer. Okay, 1 second. So the Gemara says, okay, so the Gemara goes back to the original opinion. The truth of the matter is, we're talking about where our animal, meaning a regular person's animal, it gores an animal that belongs to hektish. Okay, until now we said you're exempt from paying. However, there's another opinion. Until now we said that your animal, if one of our animals kills an animal of hektish, you're exempt from paying. But there's the opinion of Rav Shimon ben Menashe. Keep it several like Rav Shimon ben Menashe. The Tanya of Shimon ben Menashe, Rav Shimon ben Menashe taught, shor shel hektish shenagach shor shel hedyet. If you have a shor that belongs, an ox that belongs to hektish, that gores a regular person's ox, potter, he's entirely exempt. However, shel hedyet shenagach l'shor shel hektish, if a regular person's ox gores an ox that belongs to hektish, bein tam bein muan mishal mezik shalom. He says that, look, the reason why an abnormal event, goring, kicking, these events, the reason why the payment of these events is halfway is only because you're damaging your friend. But if you damage hektish, you actually have to make a full payment. You see from here that hektish is far more stringent than a regular person's payment. And therefore you say as follows, just like a regular person, when you only have to pay half the payment, you still have to pay from the best property. Hektish, when you have to make the best payment, you have to pay for the best property. Okay, Gemara says, if that's the case, this is the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. This argument of the Gemara is this is one of the arguments that's obviously wrong. So just understand that the Gemara will completely obliterate the argument in a moment. So the Gemara says, in other words, who says the debate about between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Shmuel is whether or not the valuation is nizik or mazik? Maybe everyone agrees, but the nizik shaminam. And the debate between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva is actually, in this law of Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe, is a private individual that gores whose animal gores an animal of hektish. Do they have to make a full payment or a partial payment? Maybe that's the whole debate. Now, obviously, this can't be because the Bryce is clearly not like that. Kiva several like Rav Shimon ben Menashe, Rav Shmuel several like Rabbanon. Rabbi Kiva holds like Rav Shimon ben Menashe, and Rav Shmuel goes with the opinion of Rabbanon, and he says you're completely exempt from payments. The Gemara says that can't be. Im came by loy b'hakosav. He says the pasuk came here to tell me that you pay from idus. Clearly, he's disagreeing with Rav Shmuel about something more substantive than the story of what happens when a private animal kills an animal of hektish. So that's clearly not the debate. And also, what would be the kal v'chomer l'hektish if that's not relevant to the debate? Moreover, Rav Ashi said that there's a clear brisa, made of sedei, made of karmi shalom, made of sedei shal nizik, made of karmi shal nizik, divrei b'shmol. Rabbi Kiva, made of sedei shal mazik, made of sadik, karmi shal mazik. There is a clear, the brisa says very clearly, there's a debate between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, how we evaluate the definition of idus, whether that definition is dependent on the nizik, the one who was damaged, or whether it's dependent on the mazik, the one who damaged. Put together. Okay, top of Memtes of the base. Four lines down, end of the line. Ravina says, another possibility. Okay, so going back to the original question. What was the original question? The Gemara says this tikkun ha'olam that nizokin damages pays idus. The Gemara asks, what do you mean tikkun ha'olam? There's some sort of rabbinical decree. It's not a rabbinical decree. It's a pasuk. The first specifically states, mate of karma, you have to pay the best. So Ravina has another resolution. Ravina says, of course, the mission could be even according to Rabbi Kiva that we evaluate the definition of idus, of the best, the most fertile property, is defined in terms of the mazik's property, the one who damaged, not in the one who was damaged. Rav Shimon he didorish time of the crop. It's the opinion of Rav Shimon that says that learns the understanding of that learns the reasoning behind the verses. 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So basically, the law is as follows. The one is not allowed to take a collateral from a widow. Why? We're talking about collateral of an article of clothing because he might have to give her back the clothing, and then he'll have to come pick it up by daytime and switch it out by nighttime. And it doesn't look very good that a single woman would be, dealing with a man every day by day and night. What happens if she's rich? She's wealthy. So then you are allowed to take an article of clothing as collateral. Because the entire reason the Torah says you can't take an article is because she's poor and you're giving her a bad name. But if she's rich and she can afford to give a collateral, then you would be permitted to take an article of clothing as collateral. Correct. Now this is according to Rav Shimon that says that we look at the reasoning behind the verse. According to the rabbis, it doesn't make a difference. Because the Torah doesn't specifically give us a heter, it doesn't tell us that a rich woman is different, we treat all women the same. So our mission is going with the opinion of Rav Shimon that explains the reasoning of the verse. Umatam kamra. The mission is saying, what's the reason? Why did the Torah say you have to pay matam and zakon shamalhem be'edis and they take an island? Why do you get the best property? Because we want to make sure people don't damage. And that's sort of the reasoning behind the verse.
So it's almost part of your knas.
Yeah, well, it's sort of the reason why the Torah said it was sort of to give a penalty. Yeah. The Tanya Amr Rav Shimon said, "They ma Amr and Zakan Shamalhem be'edis and they gazlonim de'acham sanim." A person, why did the Torah say you pay back with idis the best property? Because of the robbers. A person should think, why am I stealing? Or chamas is more of a sure. In this kind, typically chamas is when you steal a very small amount. Anyway, but chamas here could also be where he's coercing the sale. Now the problem is if you coerce the sale is actually valid. It would have to be extort. Yeah, the problem is extortion actually works. Technically speaking, if you do extort somebody to sell a property, the sale is valid. Get to that in Kedushin. It's called Tluv V'Zav. I think it's in Kedushin. Yeah, Tluv V'Zaven. Is it Kedushin? It might be even Gittin. Not sure. It's either in Kedushin or Gittin. Okay, regardless. Person Bezin will come down to my property and they'll confiscate, they'll collect the most valuable of my property. So therefore, I won't, I should think twice before engaging in such behavior. And they'll rely on what the Torah says. That you get the best field. Therefore, they said, therefore, they said that damages get idis. Okay. Why does a b'chayiv get mid-range property? Because we're concerned of jealousy here. A person will see his friend has this very fertile property, or a beautiful house. And it'll say, I'll lend him a lot of money, in very easy terms. That I should be able to collect the debt. Is like the what do they call the Chinese initiative, the Road and Belt Initiative, right? Lend a poor country an enormous amount of money, and this way, time comes, we can collect whatever we built. Therefore, they said, "B'chayiv collects beininus." The Gemara says, "El me'at." If that's the case, you should collect the lowest range property. So the Gemara says, if you can collect the lowest range property, nobody will want to lend money because they'll end up with a property that they can't really sell. Ksubas isha b'ziburis, the ksuba of a woman is the lowest range property. Divrei Rabbi Yehudah, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. Rameir says it's mid-range. Rav Shimon said, why did they say that a ksuba gets the lowest range property? More than a man wants to get married, a woman wants to be married. Another point. A woman goes out whether she likes. A woman can be divorced whether she likes it or not. A man cannot be. Okay, my davaracha. What's this alternative explanation? If you'll tell me, in other words, why don't we have a ksuba from the woman to the man? And the obvious answer here is because the man is the one who's able to give divorce, not the woman. So in other words, the primary point of ksuba is for divorce. The only secondary point is when the husband dies. After the mashal gita, because the man doesn't, until he gives her a divorce, she's not divorced. And therefore technically he can be married, he can remain married to her without giving her a divorce. So therefore, the penalty was given on the husband has to pay ksuba and not the woman. See you tomorrow. Great day.
Oh.